What's up guys? In this video I'm going to cover 4 SB tactical braces. I will compare all of these right here and then talk about which one is my favorite. Let's get into it. Okay, so the models we'll be comparing is the SBA 3, the SBA 4, SBA 5, and SBPDW. So first off, let's talk about length. So if we're talking about length, one would think that this guy right here would actually be one of the shortest options. However, if you're using a regular buffer tube and no fancy alternative buffer systems inside here or a piston, this is kind of the limit to how compressed that this can go. So I'm a little bit disappointed with this one, if I'm going to be honest, as far as overall length. I was hoping that it would go in a little bit shorter. That's kind of why I got this style, and it's honestly about on par with these ones too. The SBA 4 here being the longest. You know, if you're going to get a brace, obviously it's most likely a shorter option, a shorter barrel option. So, you know, you want to try to keep the overall compactness down if you can. And this kind of doesn't completely accomplish that, in my opinion. But yeah, if we're comparing these three right here, it appears that the SBA 4 is the longest, the SBA 5 shorter, and here we have the SBA 3 even a little bit shorter than that. So overall length, it looks like the SBA 3 and the SBA 5 are very close. Here's the length for the SBA 4. So right at about 7 inches. SBA 5 coming in at a little over 6. SBA 3 is about the same as the 5. And the PDW coming in at about 7. Okay, now let's look at the width. PDW is coming in at about 2.5 inches. Sorry, it's kind of hard to show you guys. SBA 3 is right at about 2 inches. SBA 4 is just over 2.25. SBA 5 is about 2.5. And overall height. PDW is 5 inches. SBA 3 is just under 6 inches. SBA 4 is 5 inches. SBA 5 just over 5 inches. Okay, and here you can see the open gap for all of these for if you were to wrap this around your arm and tie it. So as you can see, it looks like the SBA 4 has the most length here to do so. SBA 5, however, right here on the end, is the widest, and the PDW is very similar to the SBA 5 here. Okay, so why did we just do this? Well, we're going to talk about these braces in terms of if you were firing your weapon and if this were to make contact with your body in various ways. So if you're firing this with the cheek, your cheek right up here, so you have a cheek weld right up here, and let's just say that this were to somehow make contact with the front of your chest as you're firing. So if that were to happen, which of these options here would be the most secure, or which of these would be the strongest? So if we're talking about these in those terms, now we can start to look at all the different dimensions of how that interaction will happen with the front of your body, and also which design is best to support that. So with those terms in mind, let's talk about the SBA 3 first. So while it is the slimmest and smallest design and does have a long length, this rubber piece is overall pretty flimsy in my opinion. And if that were to happen, if it's pushing into you, this really moves a lot and doesn't have a whole lot of stability. You can see it's pretty easy to move it right here. So imagine if you're firing and then it's making that contact. There's also a lot of wiggle in play. It really bothers me how much wiggle this is, and when these start to get overlapped. Now I have seen some bands that wrap around here the same way that it does from the factory, and then a band that wraps in this part here too. So that's a part that you could take a look at, but for me, I think that's something they should have done from the factory. I don't really want to spend extra parts on an already expensive piece of plastic, in my opinion. So if we're talking about in those terms, I think this is the least sturdy. Now the PDW over here is also a little bit flimsy in that regard, and there is even more play for these to overlap pretty easily. And I don't know why, it just bothers the heck out of me. It feels not very stable, and it is also the shortest height. Now, with those terms in mind, if you're looking at the SBA 4 and the SBA 5, both have a reinforcement rubber piece that comes down here, whereas the SBA 3 does not. So these are much more secure and sturdy for that movement. If I am pushing up forward on this, there is really no play here. Same with this one. Also, if you are to look at this middle part, there is still some wiggle here for sure, but when you are out in practice and actually using this, it is much less than the SBA 3. Now, if we're looking at the SBA 5, this one is actually the most rigid of them all. If you take a look, you can see it's a little bit thicker in the layering right here, and the way the ridge comes to the point down here is a little bit more defined, especially if you are to compare it to this guy right here. So look at the thickness difference on the bottom, the overall shape, and especially right here. So yeah, the overall structure is quite different. What's nice is there's a QD on all three of these models here. And then on the PDW, there's one in the back here. I don't like that as much. I definitely like these dual on the side QD points. They all have a similar buffer adjustment button kind of underneath here. And those are all really nice, whereas the PDW has one button on the side here. So that is much more ideal for a right-hand shooter. So real quick, let's go back to those who will be wrapping this around their wrist. This one has the softest rubber and might be the most forgiving for wrapping around your wrist. This one has a bit larger hole and actually might be even bigger than the SBA 3, but it has the most hard rubber, so it might be compressing or clamping a little bit more around your forearm. And then if you look at the SBA 4, the FDE in the middle, that has the longest point to wrap around your forearm. However, it is quite stiff and rigid, and there's a lot of rubber contact here and up here. And the PDW has some of the softest rubber for sure, and quite a large hole to insert your forearm in there as well. So if you're forearm shooting, I would say this one or this one appears to be the softest, and this one and this one appears to have the widest gap. So for me, what is most important is thinking about if that contact does hit my shoulder or chest. So with that criteria being the most important to me, I would say the PDW is by far my least favorite. Okay, of these three, while this one is the smallest and lightest, it does look very cool. Ultimately, the function of this is less preferred than these two. So again, thinking about that contact with the chest, I would say this one is in third place. All right, so these are in my top two. So which of these two do I prefer? Well, I think they're both really good. The SBA 4 here, definitely an upgrade from the SBA 3 with this supporting ridge right here. But the SBA 5 is kind of like a combination of these two. So you have this support moved back a little bit on the SBA 5. So it has the appearance of looking a little bit smaller overall. But also, it is by far the most rigid, especially if you're looking here. You can see how much bend this one, the SBA 4 has, compared to the SBA 5 is much harder to move. So the rigidity on the SBA 5 is very, very good. By far the best of them all. So if that's what's important to you, which it is for me, this is my number one here. Also, if you look at the overall shape, I don't know if you're cheek weld is what is preferred to you. For me, these all work quite well, but you can see the SBA 5 on the end is a bit more tapered towards the end. All of them are pretty good for me. That doesn't make a crazy amount of difference for me. What is important to me most is the amount of rigidity that I'm getting. So This is my guy here. Now, if rigidity is important to you, like I just mentioned, which it is for me, the SBA 4 is still really, really good in my opinion. So if you find this on discount, I would say still go for it. These are a little bit hard to find right now. So just something to think about. One other thing to mention here is that when these are attached on the buffer tube, something that kind of bothers me sometimes is if there's wiggle or play when it is attached to the buffer tube. So these have maybe a little bit, nothing too crazy, but you can also add like electric tape and try to wrap it a little bit inside the buffer tube. So these all do pretty decent. But this one here, there is a lot of wiggle room in play. So listen to this. I hope you guys can hear that okay, but yeah, that wiggle and play of the metal on metal in here is just kind of annoying. I don't really like it that much. These have definitely less than that, so just a side note. And there you have it, guys. I hope that information was helpful for you. If it was, feel free to throw up a thumbs up and also consider subscribing to the channel. I'll see you next time. Take care.